In 1883, 3 winters had slipped quietly by since the final thunder of cannon fire drifted into memory, leaving behind a stretch of land that held its breath. Down in the southern reaches of Colorado, near the parched ground of Dry Creek territory, silence settled heavy like a scar. There, on a piece of weathered land where fences leaned like weary men and the soil cracked with thirst, stood High Hollow Ranch. It wasn't a sight to turn heads, just an old house with sun-bleached timber, porch boards that groaned underfoot, and a hush so deep even the birds seemed to pause mid-song. That's where she came, one early morning with frost still clinging to the air. A wagon crept up the track, as if wary of stirring old ghosts. Seated at the back, boots dusty and ribbon tied neat at her throat, was a woman named Rebecca Wynne. Her eyes carried the weight of stories untold, her presence quiet but resolute, like someone who'd paid life's toll and didn't flinch at the cost. On the porch stood Boone Mercer, said to be the last of his name, a man with grief etched into every line of his face. He wore it like a second skin, worn thin but always there. When their eyes met, his voice rasped low. "You the one answered the notice?" She didn't waver. "If the job's still open." He gave a short nod. "Kitchen's out back. Side room's yours. Pump's by the well. It's quiet here." She met his gaze steady. "Quiet suits me. No handshake. No smiles. Just 2 people standing on either side of a door neither had opened in years." Her skirt brushed the hem of his coat as she passed. Barely a touch, but more than enough. Boone didn't know it yet, but that house was about to learn a different kind of quiet, the kind born not of emptiness, but of someone finally willing to listen. Rebecca rose before the first rooster stirred, stoked the stove with steady hands, and filled the air with the smell of coffee and baking bread. She didn't speak much, just moved through the morning like she'd been doing it all her life. Boone passed through now and then, silent and solid, nodding once when he saw her at the hearth. Most days he vanished before dawn and returned long after starlight had soaked the sky. Other times he'd sit near the fire, boots still dusty, saying nothing at all. But she didn't mind. Silence was a language she'd learned early and well. She'd once worked a grand house in Los Alamos, lace curtains, polished silver. Hired to cook, but the man of the house had softer hands and sharper eyes, and what he really wanted wasn't a cook. She'd left the next morning with her things thrown on the porch and his words still bitter in her ears. "Women like you don't last." She didn't reply, just left. Before that, there'd been her mother during the war. Frail and coughing, cooking over ash while Rebecca stirred broth and tried not to look at the blood. A neighbor once left them apples and a note that read, "For your strength," the only kindness she remembered that winter. So yes, quiet didn't scare her. It was familiar. It was home. There was a dog at High Hollow. Copper, they called him. Grizzled, ribs showing. At first, he ignored her. But one morning, as she hummed a tune her mother once sang, kneading dough by the window, Copper stepped off the porch and settled at her feet. Boone saw it happen. Didn't say a word. Just watched. Something in his expression shifting, unsure whether to welcome the change or brace against it. Then came the storm. A sudden downpour from the hills, loud and fast. Rebecca had just hung the wash when the wind tore the line loose, sending shirts tumbling across the prairie. She ran, skirts whipping, hands grabbing at fabric like it might vanish. Slipped in the mud, went down hard, then felt a hand steady her. Boone. Rain dripping from his coat, beard soaked, one hand at her elbow, the other snatching a shirt from the air. His voice was steady, firm. "Didn't expect you out in this mess." Breathless, soaked, she grinned. "Didn't want your clothes ending up in Santa Fe." And for the first time since she'd arrived, Boone Mercer smiled. Back inside, he handed her a towel and said no more. Didn't have to. That night, she hummed again as she worked, and Boone stood in the hallway, watching her from the shadows. No words passed, but his shoulders had softened, no longer braced against an unseen blow. The silence in the house had changed. It had begun to feel like something alive. Days passed like water over smooth stone. Rebecca did more than cook. She tended, the way people do when they've lived through disorder and crave something they can set right. She polished windows until they shimmered, scrubbed the floors till they breathed again, fixed a drawer that hadn't opened right in 5 years, said nothing about it. Didn't expect Boone to notice, but he did. He began lingering in the kitchen, arms folded, just watching. Watching her hands, her calm, her quiet fire. One morning, she found a package by the back door. Brown paper, twine. Inside, a pair of new shoes, soft leather, strong stitching. She sat with them in her lap a long while. That evening, over stew and coffee, she broke the silence. "Those shoes," she said. "You didn't buy them by chance, did you?" Boone shrugged, eyes lowered. "Saw 'em in town. Figured they looked like they could carry a woman who don't sit still." She turned her spoon slowly. "They're finer than any pair I've worked in." His voice was quiet. "Good. They weren't meant for work." She said no more, but wore them the next morning. That night, after she'd gone to bed, Boone stayed by the fire, drew open a drawer long untouched. A whiff of old lavender rose as he unwrapped a ribbon, a button, and a folded note. The last his wife had written him. It read, "Boone, if I don't make it, don't let the house die with me. Let it breathe again. Plant something. Talk to someone. Don't disappear with the dust." He read it twice, then once more before the flames went out. The following morning, Boone didn't say much, but there was something different in the way he walked. Not lighter exactly, just more present. More drawn toward the kitchen, toward the hum of fresh bread rising in silence that no longer felt empty, felt like beginning. That evening, he placed a second gift beside her plate. A silver brooch shaped like a blooming columbine. There was no card, no words, just a silent gesture. Rebecca lifted it carefully, turning it between her fingers as though it might vanish from too much touch. She didn't speak, but gratitude hung in the air all the same. Later that week, as she folded linens, Boone handed her something else. A drawing done in crayon on creased paper, 2 stick figures in front of a crooked house, flowers at the front. "My wife drew it," he said, "right after she told me we were expecting." His voice caught. "After she died, I stuffed it in a drawer. Couldn't bear looking at what never happened." Rebecca ran her thumb along the paper's edge and said, soft but steady, "It's still growing, Boone. Just different ground now." They didn't talk more that night, but the house exhaled around them, like it had waited years to breathe. Healing doesn't make announcements. It just starts, unnoticed, until one day it's there. Trouble isn't always loud either. Sometimes it slips through the door folded in paper. One morning, Boone returned from town, boots dusty, holding a tightly folded letter. He said little, just placed it where the sun lit it like a warning flare. Rebecca opened it slowly, read each word twice. It was from Roland Haynes, Boone's brother-in-law through marriage, claiming rights to the land, saying Boone's late wife had left him her share. He planned to collect. Boone stood behind her, jaw locked. Never saw that letter before. Never heard from him after she passed. And now he wants a piece. Rebecca didn't blink. She examined the signature, touched the lines with her finger, and said, "The handwriting's off. The seal's not right. Date's 2 weeks after she died." Boone blinked. She added, "I used to work for a lawyer. Filed half the town's records while he pickled his liver." The next day, Boone rode to see Charlie Merritt, the town's lawyer, honest as a hammer and twice as blunt. Charlie read the letter, snorted. "Fake. Bad job too. Seal's wrong. Ink's still wet in places. Whoever caught this has a sharp eye." Boone nodded. "That'd be her." Charlie gave him a look. "You better hang on to that one." That night, Boone stood under the stars beside the barn, staring at the land like it might slip away. He knew what loss felt like, had lived inside it. But now someone else shared the house. A week later, Roland showed up, 2 hard-faced men behind him, dressed like trouble. Boone was already on the porch, Rebecca beside him, calm as morning sun. Roland climbed down with a smirk. "Still holding out, Boone? Grief makes a man careless." Boone said nothing. Rebecca spoke instead. "You're a bit late with your condolences, Mr. Haynes." Roland eyed her. Didn't know the help had opinions. She stepped forward. Neither did the land until someone started caring for it. Boone's voice was low but firm. She's not the help. She's the reason this place is alive again. Then Charlie Merritt rode up, dismounted with purpose, legal papers in hand. Court saw the forgery. Decisions final. No rights, no claim. And if you want fraud charges, keep pushing. He nodded at the men. Your call. Roland saw no opening. He swung back into the saddle, shot one last look at Rebecca, and rode off. Boone exhaled like he hadn't in years. You saved this place, he said. Rebecca took his hand. No, Boone. We did. The land didn't change that day, but it felt claimed not by ink or blood, but by choice. By staying. Weeks passed. The road forgot the echo of Roland's boots. One Sunday, Boone came into the kitchen, clean shirt, careful energy. Something lingered behind his eyes. Church picnic today, he said. Thought maybe we could go. Rebecca turned, wiped her hands, studied him. You haven't seen that crowd in years. Maybe that's why I should. She nodded. All right then, let's go. She wore her patched blue dress, hair tied with the ribbon he'd once found in her book. He hitched the wagon and they rode in together, not like it was something new, but like it had always been that way. People noticed. Boone Mercer, long silent, side by side with a woman who wasn't his wife, but looked like she belonged. Whispers stirred. Is that him? Someone murmured. Thought he was long gone. That's the woman staying with him, right? Boone just tipped his hat when Amos Griggs called. Glad to see you among the living. Rebecca walked with quiet strength, like she'd known worse than gossip and learned to rise anyway. Mrs. Tilly Grant, guarding the pie table like a post commander, approached with a shrewd once-over, then a smile. You must be her. That house looks lived in lately. Rebecca replied with grace. I keep it warm. He keeps it standing. Tilly nodded. Good trade. We all could use more warmth. Across the lawn, Della Fisk muttered behind her glove. Living together, no ring. Shameful. Her daughter said nothing, just watched Boone laugh. Really laugh. At something Elias Dunn said. Then little Mary Beth, the preacher's girl, wandered up to Rebecca, her tiny fist full of columbines. Shyly, as if giving something sacred, she held out the flowers. Mama had told her they were meant for beautiful people. And to her, Rebecca was the most beautiful one there. Rebecca leaned down, accepting the blossoms with a reverence that felt holy, whispering her thanks like a prayer. She promised to keep them in the window. Boone had seen the whole exchange, with a calm that seemed to still even the wind around them. He turned to those nearby and said, This is Rebecca Wynne. She keeps my home. She kept me warm when I might have gone cold. After that, the others just shared food and quiet nods, pulling up chairs to make space. Later that evening, back at the ranch, Rebecca set the columbines in a tin pitcher near the window. For the first time in ages, the house held more than silence. It held a feeling of place, of being wanted. Their days found a slow, steady rhythm. Not hurried, not noisy, but real. She started planting out back. Vegetables, yes, but also more columbines. Red and yellow, white and soft blue, like summer wishes whispered into the soil. One morning, Boone saw her out there, knees dug into earth, hands sure and dirt-streaked. He didn't speak, just walked back to the barn. That evening, when she came around, there was a new bench waiting at the garden's edge. Smooth juniper, unpainted, a place to sit among things beginning to grow. She found it just before the sun slipped away, sat quietly, and Boone joined her later with 2 mugs of tea. They didn't speak, and they didn't need to. A few days on, she discovered a book left on her pillow, wrapped in brown paper, tied with ribbon. It was poetry. That night, she flipped through it by firelight. Boone passed by, paused, asked, Any good? She looked up with a glint in her eye. Haven't decided. Some of it feels like the poet got lost halfway through. Boone laughed. Then it's like real life. Evenings became their habit. She sewed while he read aloud, sometimes stumbling. "What the hell is a metaphor anyway?" he muttered once. "Means you're supposed to feel it, not figure it out," she replied. "Sounds like a trick." "Sometimes it is." She smiled, eyes still on her stitching. Then came the day he left for Barlow's post, promising to return by sundown. But the sun fell, then stars, then wind. Still no Boone. Rebecca waited, lantern lit, tea untouched, sitting by the window with the old dog curled at her feet. Just before midnight, she saw him, limping down the path, ribs held tight, blood soaking his shirt. She ran to him. "What happened?" "Horse spooked. Wagon turned," he groaned. "You walked all the way back?" He nodded. "Didn't want to lose time sending for help. Was afraid you wouldn't be here when I returned." She helped him inside, cleaned the wounds, wrapped him gently, then asked, soft as breath, "Why would I leave?" Boone stared at the fire. "Because good things, they usually do." She took his hand. "I'm not leaving, Boone. Not unless you ask me to." He didn't speak, but his fingers closed around hers, and that said enough. His healing was slow, wounds like that don't rush. Rebecca stayed, brought broth, changed bandages, read poetry when the wind scraped the windows. She never said she would. He never asked. It simply became the way of things. One evening, sun dipping behind the ridge, she sat on that bench he made, hands folded, eyes on the blooming columbines, in the dirt that once refused to give life. Boone stepped out, careful but walking strong. He stood beside her for a while, then eased down. "I used to think this land would be the end of me," he said. She replied, "Maybe it still will, but not before it gives you something back." He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded note, creased and softened by handling. She opened it, his handwriting rough, but the words sure. "No need to ask you to stay. You already have. But if you'll allow it, I'd like to make it official. Name and all." She looked up, and Boone, the man who once only knew fences and loss, cupped her face, kissed her like he'd finally arrived somewhere that made sense. They married the next Sunday. Just them, Reverend Ames from Dry Creek, and the dog dozing under the cottonwood. She wore her old patched blue dress, the silver brooch pinned to her collar, a gift from Boone from long before words found their way. Shaped like a blooming columbine, that brooch spoke now in full. Columbines had always grown wild on the hills, little symbols of faith, love, and hope, pushing through the hardest ground. Rebecca carried all three, not loudly, not as a banner, but simply daily. That brooch wasn't just silver. It bore witness. Afterward, they sat by the fire with tea, just like always. Only now, there was a name carved into the bench outside, and a place set at the table, for a life that wasn't stumbled upon, but chosen.